Hey, hello there, and welcome to Talking with Tony. I'm your host, Tony Jones. We're on YouTube tonight with Fred Blatchford, who, of course, is our chief contributor of Talking with Tony. And when I said, like, hey, Fred, what do you think about going over to YouTube? We wouldn't be able to do this without you. He was like, go for it. He appeared on the initial episode here of season 14. He's back here tonight. Would have had him before, but Fred, you are a busy man, hard to track down sometimes.
Boy, it seems like that lately. I've been all over the country in the last 6 weeks.
We were talking about you, some former guests of Talking with Tony, and they were wanting to know a little bit more about you. And they had heard that we had mentioned your mom's passing a couple years back. What about an update on your dad? Tell us about how's your dad doing?
Actually, he just celebrated his 90th birthday last week. Thank you for asking. And for somebody who's 90 years old, imagine what a 90-year-old man is like. And he is pretty much what the 90-year-old man would be like. He's in good health for 90 years old, still spry. He's not driving as much anymore, which is probably a good thing. But he's in great health. He really is. And I think in his mind, 90 was sort of a goal that he wanted to get to be 90 years old. So he met it last Monday, actually, was his 90th birthday.
Wow.
And we gave him an electronic foot massaging device that helps him massage his feet. So I guess that's probably an appropriate gift for a 90-year-old man too.
I see those and things for circulation advertised on television. You start paying attention.
He actually put it on with his socks on, and I said, "No, I think you're supposed to take your socks off to make this work effectively." So once he did that, he goes, "Oh, this is pretty nice." So I guess that's what we have to look forward to, Tony. Is when we get to be 90 years old, we get a foot massager.
If we were only that fortunate,
if we're only that fortunate, that's a fact.
We call Fred here because people have called him that have watched the show before, The World's Most Interesting Man. And he's a good sport about it, but he has a very interesting life. We'll get into some of that life tonight. We'll talk some football and talk some other things as well. On a serious note, though, since some of our viewers are new, because the first 13 years of Talking with Tony, you had to have a subscription to WOW, and they may have heard us refer to Normie and stuff. Could you share just something about her real quick, Fred, before we start, since we just mentioned your dad?
Yeah,
I know that I want to go ahead.
I was going to say she was a unique woman. She did pass away a couple of years ago, and the one story that resonates with me is that, she was a stay-home mom. And she told me one time, she says, when I die and I come back in my next life, I want to go to Auburn. So as you know, I gifted a study hall area at the Harvard College of Business. So in essence, when she passed away, she has now come back and gone to Auburn, and she's there every day helping the students get better prepared for their life after college.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I wasn't aware of that. I know where she is now. She's absolutely in heaven, and I would think that in the last years of her life, she was fully aware of your devotion and dedication to Auburn that goes way back as a proud alum. But now you also serve, and she knew you were serving on the alumni board as well. So I know she had to be extremely proud, not only of your professional success, Fred, with Johnson & Johnson, but everything that you've done to help your university be better through the years.
She was my biggest fan, no doubt about that, as all moms are.
Yeah,
most of the time anyway. Most of the time. Jake's mom is a big fan.
I know you miss her like I miss my father. I mean, but I was thinking about your dad watching the Lightning last night. It's their best game that I've seen him play. And he's sort of, especially in the playoffs, he gets that extra push because he knows how much it means to you. And your family really gets behind the Lightning. And I usually do too, because my Rangers are usually eliminated from the playoffs and I have no choice but to support the Lightning. But hockey season provides a boost for him.
He was actually texting me back and forth last night during the game. I wasn't watching; I was doing something else, but he was texting me back and forth. It does. It gives him a lot. He complains, and he can't understand why that the Atlanta market doesn't cover every Lightning game. He's not quite sure that whole geography thing as it relates to TV coverage, but what he does, he takes his iPad and he just keeps refreshing the game stuff on the internet, so he just keeps refreshing it. I was at the game. I was at the opening night game a couple of weeks ago in Tampa, and I was sending him the text. And then I guess over the weekend, for whatever reason, I guess Comcast in Atlanta, they weren't broadcasting ESPN, and he was all cranked up about the fact that they weren't covering that game. So, yeah, he is a huge fan. It goes back to, he grew up in Boston, was a big Boston Bruins fan. He's been going to hockey games all his entire life, and he's adopted the Lightning since I've been down here and went to many games over the years. So no, it is again, at 90 years old, he's looking for things to watch on TV, and the Lightning are something that he gets a kick out of watching.
Well, you are always sarcastic whenever the Lightning lose their first game of the season. Well, that's it. That's it. It's it's done. It's done. Destiny, dynasty over, I should say. But that was an incredible win for them against the Hurricanes, because the Hurricanes are actually the favorite to win the East. And the Lightning, without Vasilevsky, 3-0 shutout. And it's, I think it's encouraging, and I think it's a sign of, we know they'll be in the playoffs. And I've found out through the years, Fred, in multiple sports, Braves fans can certainly raise their hand and agree with this. It doesn't really matter what happens in the regular season, as long as you qualify for the playoffs. That's what matters.
Yeah, I mean, in an odd sort of way, you think about Vasilevsky, and we were talking about this the other night, that think about how many games he as a goalie has played in the last 6 years, and in high pressure games too. So he has played regular season games, for 4 or 5 years in a row. They were either in the conference finals or the Stanley Cup. So I don't know how many games he's played, but that's been a huge wear and tear on his body, which obviously at some point in time, depending on your age, he kind of broke down. So he had back surgery. He's out for a couple of months. So if you look at sort of the silver lining of that injury, when he does come back, his body should be pretty well rested, considering he hasn't had a break from hockey in 6 years. And so that could be an advantage for them, because, as you know better than anybody, the team with the hottest goalie when you get to the playoffs usually makes a pretty deep run. So, if he's well rested and they're not an 8th seed and they're not having to climb out of, the toughest, seed against the number 1 seed, it could be a good thing if you're looking for the silver lining. But clearly there's a difference between any goalie and Vasilevsky on the Lightning.
There was one night where it was during the COVID playoffs of 2020, you were playing the Blue Jackets, and at 4, 5, 6 overtime, Corpuscello, or whatever his name was for the Blue Jackets, he had 80, 90 saves. You were sending me texts like, this guy stops everything.
Well, I mean, we've even talked about that, about the team. I mean, if you think about the number of games that core of that team has played over the last 6 or 7 years, right, I'll bet you there is no players that have played more games in the last couple of years than Hedman and Vasilevsky. Kucherov has been injured periodically, so, not so much. But a couple of those guys, Sergachev, those guys have played a lot of hockey. And they talk about hockey old. They're not old chronologically, but they're hockey old.
Right.
And they have, been grinding it out for the last 5 or 6 years. And it eventually takes your toll on a team. And those guys have just played a lot of hockey games. They're not old, but they're hockey old.
In case people are as familiar with you who maybe didn't have Wild that have seen you do so many spots here, we call you the chief contributor to Talking with Tony. But as a kid, you got to experience an awesome thing being there in person when Henry Aaron established the home run. Hank Aaron established the home run record against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Can you take us back there and take us down memory lane?
I don't know how my dad got the tickets. We had moved he did it in 74. I think we moved to Atlanta in 71. But somehow my dad got 4 seats on the Braves side of the field, lower level, right there at the dugout. I mean, you couldn't go on StubHub, though it didn't exist back then, and get 4 better seats than we had. And all I remember is, obviously, he hit it over the left field fence. And I was, 11, 12 at the time. And I remember when he hit it, and I remember seeing it go up. But by the time it got out there, everybody else had stood up. So I didn't really see anything. And I always tell people, I never saw those two guys run out on the field, if you remember the famous run around the bases, I never saw those guys because everybody jumped up in front of me, and so I couldn't see it. So obviously, it was one of those rare things. I actually still have the tickets in the game program. They actually gave out everybody a little certificate that says you were there, and you had to sign it. I signed it, and it clearly looked like a 12-year-old boy's signature when I did it. But I still have it, and in the game program. I don't know if it's worth anything to anybody that, unless you were there. But no, it was a unique experience, obviously, being there, and a historic moment. And it was interesting. But like I said, I didn't see those two guys running on the field. I've seen it obviously 1,000 times on the videos, but yeah, I don't remember seeing those guys out because everybody stood up in front of me.
You were one of two guys that I've been able to ask about this, and I can't ask the other one anymore because he's passed away. But Casey Motter, the longtime Braves public address announcer who we lost last year, was a frequent guest on Talking with Tony. And when he was a kid, he was even younger than you, were 7 or 8. He was there then. And, he said, but to have that part of history, he says, and he told that part about getting the deal that you just described there at the game and all. That's very significant to be there when that kind of history is made, because Fred, records, they say, are made to be broken. That's what they say. I don't think anyone is going to get to that record because it requires not only power, but it requires stamina as far as a long career goes. Often, you need these at bats, you need seasons, and we just don't see that. These players are so hurt now; they're so fragile. Judge missed a bunch of time for the Yankees this year. Yeah, he had set the single season record the year before. But when you're talking about what Aaron has done, what you're talking about, what some of those guys have done, I can't see that record being broken.
No, I mean, and not to take anything away from them, they make a ton of money. So nobody wants to play 22, 23 years now because they don't need to. I mean, these guys are making hundreds of millions of dollars generational. So what's the drive and the motivation to stay in the league for 20 some odd years like Hank Aaron did? I mean, clearly by the time he had gotten to that point, he was on the downside of his career as well. I mean, his best years were gone. He did play a few more years after that, but it'll be hard. I mean, it'll just be hard. I mean, the pitchers have gotten bigger and stronger and faster. So it will be hard to hit 715. I mean, you could do a whole Talking with Tony show on whether Hank Aaron really still owns the home run record versus some of the folks who broke it after the fact, based on, PEDs. But it was one of those unique experiences that, even like, when Judge broke the single season record, I mean, just to hit that kind of home runs. And obviously at least at this point, anybody thinks he was using PEDs, but yeah, those are iconic records. I can still remember 714 was a thing. I mean, everybody talked about it. And when he hit 715, it was a big deal, and rightfully so. And he was a well-deserving, person to break that record. If you think about, not only did he have to overcome all the baseball stuff, but obviously that was a different time and era in our country as it relates to, race and race discrimination, stuff like that. So he was dealing with all that stuff as well. So, it was a big deal.
Yeah, no, I would have loved to have been there. Like I would have loved to have been at the 1973 Belmont Stakes when Secretary of Clinton Brown in the manner that he did. It's been described by so many people that it was such an overwhelming thing, such an emotional thing. People were moved to tears. Jack Nicklaus wasn't even there, and it's told the story to an old CBS guy. You might remember it was Haywood Haley Brown. It had a name similar to that, but he said to him, Haywood, as I was watching, and I just started crying. And he said, and later on, the writer William Knack, who worked for Sports Illustrated and covered horse racing in New York, he said in a brilliant moment of epiphany and insight, he says, Jack, he says, can't you, Haywood told him this, he says, you've been trying in your game to be perfect your entire career. That moment at the Belmont Stakes, you saw it, and that's why I thought that's two things. If I could have been there and at the 1980 when we beat the Russians and what was really the semifinals, to be honest with you. They did a little medal round thing.
People don't remember that, but that's true.
They had to come back and beat Finland, which they did 4-2 after trailing 2-1 after 2 periods against Finland. Be there at that kind of night as far as like patriotism and love of America. Yeah. America, I mean, look, we're in a bad situation right now, but what we got, that was even worse back then.
You know, I don't know if I actually met Mike Eruzione. We actually had him speak for a company function, and the vice president of marketing didn't know anything about hockey. And he calls me up and he says, we're having Mike Eruzione speak. I don't really know anything about it. Do you want to take him to dinner just to have him something to do? Because he's speaking the next day. So in an odd sort of way, I actually did get to meet him. And obviously, you think about records and you think of iconic records. Babe Ruth. You just have to say Babe Ruth. 714 comes right to your head. You think of Roger Maris. You think of 61 comes right to your head. You think about, Secretariat, the 2-minute, the 2-minute barrier and all that kind of stuff. Those are the kind of records that people break records all the time, and records fall all the time. But those iconic ones are ones that stick out. And obviously the Russian game, I was actually a freshman, and I can remember watching it in the dorm, in my dorm room, watching that game. And you're right, it was the semifinals, and most people don't remember that they had to win one more game after that to win the gold medal. But yeah.
And it wasn't even shown live. Look, ABC came on at 8 Eastern time and started showing. They played the game at 5 o'clock. Russia would not move the game to let it be shown in prime time. Now they would go ahead and show it regardless because they get more hours of coverage. And we've had, remember the whole red, blue, and white channels of the Summer Olympic Games. It was absolutely awful. But I was like, my roommates and I were like 3 of 9 people in America that subscribed to that deal. But these days they would show, but word was kind of leaking out because the other channels wanted to steal their ABC.
Oh, sure.
Line from, but
it wasn't Twitter back then, so it had to leak out.
No internet. And ESPN was in its infancy, so they had it.
When you think about Al Michaels' career was made by that. Do you believe in miracles call at that moment? I mean, he became a thing, and that's been 40 years ago that he made that call, and he's still calling Monday Night Football or Thursday Night Football, whatever, or Sunday Night Football, whatever one he does now. But that was an iconic moment for him.
I think it's hard to keep up because football is on every different channel now. We have to stream games, but I think he's the Thursday night Amazon game with Kirk.
You might be right. Yes,
who can't pick college football, not like we can, but apparently they think that he's something. So it's kind of like once you get to being Ryan Seacrest or being like Kirk Herbstreit, you just get to do everything, whether or not you're good at it or not. Like Dick Clark used to be that person, and now Ryan Seacrest is that person. And I'm like, he was in Athens when after I graduated from Auburn, I lived in Athens, and he was there. He wasn't anything there, but he is now. So, good for him, right? Fred, you do have an interesting life. You appear, of all places, up in New York for the debut of Aaron Rodgers with the New York Jets on Monday Night Football. Much anticipated. And what did you get? 4 plays?
Yeah, it was unplanned. I was going up there. We were having a global leadership team meeting. And when I got off the plane, I got a text and said, do you want to go to the football game? And I went, what football game? And they said, Monday night, Aaron Rodgers, New Jersey or at New York. And I'm like, sure. What are we going to get tickets? And we actually StubHubbed them. And they were fairly reasonable, $400. We were literally on the lower level in the end zone that Aaron Rodgers was at. And we were probably 50 yards maybe from him, because they were right underneath the goalpost. And the energy level, because, they kicked off, Buffalo punted to them. When Aaron Rodgers ran out on the field for that first series, you literally could have lit up a light bulb with the energy that was in that room or in that stadium. And then obviously, and since we scalped him, we sat in this group of probably 20 guys that all knew each other either really closely or not, that were season ticket holders, lifelong suffering New York Jets season ticket holders. The 2 guys that were sitting next to me, who I didn't know at the time, were brothers. And then obviously when he went down, people seen players go off the field and think, well, they'll be back in a few plays and all that kind of stuff. And so obviously he went off the field. There was a little bit of concern, but I can distinctly remember that on the Jumbotron, they showed on the video the cart coming over there to the sidelines, because he was already on the sidelines in the tent, to pick him up. And literally the place went dark. And I felt bad for these guys that were sitting around me, because they've been waiting for this moment for decades. And the brother that was sitting next to me, his brother to the left of him, literally was sitting with his hands in his face in his hands, and just cussing up a storm. That whole persona about New Yorkers and the F word and, that's a thing. Those guys were all doing it. And it was straight out of any New York fan movie that you've ever seen. Those guys yelling at every other word. It got to be the guy that I was with that works for me. We were kind of laughing about it. But and then the other thing too that I learned, that you never Uber after a New York Jets game with 75, 80,000 people all trying to get on the Uber's website at the same time. The game got over at 11. I actually laid down in the hotel room at 3:30 the next morning. And that's how long it took me to get 40 miles back to New Jersey. So yeah, it ended up on a pretty low note for me anyway. But no, it was unique, no doubt about it. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see him doing more than 3 plays, but yeah.
I would have loved for you to turn to those guys when they were in deep despair, saying, "Hey, you still got Alan Lazard and Reggie Cobb or Randall Cobb out of the deal," because that was part of the deal to come to New York. He wanted receivers that he had worked with before. So he brings in, these 2 guys from the Packers. Fred, the opponent that night was the Bills, and the Buccaneers will play them as we film this tomorrow night, Thursday Night Football. And here I'm talking with Tony, me and our guest, usually one of our football analysts this time of year. We've been giving points against the spread. I'm not going to ask you to do that for all of these. I want to give Danny's picks, though. He's 28-22, and he's our lead analyst this year. And this is who he likes this weekend. He likes Oklahoma -9.5, Louisville -4. His 5 stars, Utah +7. He likes Pittsburgh +20 against Notre Dame. Auburn, your alma mater, -7. Tennessee -3.5. UCLA -17, North Carolina -12. In that Thursday night game, he likes the Buccaneers +8.5, the Cowboys -6.5 on Sunday, and the 49ers -6. I am 30-17 on the season. I'll go ahead and reveal my picks. Everybody who knows Terry Karkoska in Auburn thinks she is amazing. She's my favorite Purdue alum. I'll go Purdue +2.5. They are at Nebraska. I am 30-17 this year against the spread, which is better than anything I've seen charted on ESPN, Yahoo, or whatever. And the great thing is we have it all documented here up on YouTube. Stanford Steve is 10 games under 500 on ESPN for the season, and Van Pelt is worse than that. They have got to where they just laugh about it. So, fellas, call me, if I can help you. I'm going with the alma mater, Auburn -7, Kentucky +3.5. UCLA -17, because Jake finds this adorable Bruin bear leaning up against the L. It's the old school UCLA that you would see in the 80s playing basketball. And then I've got 2 NFL picks. Bills -8.5 against those Buccaneers Thursday night. And I like the Seattle Seahawks -3.5. I will also tell you, even though I wear an Ohio State Buckeye jersey every game, I think Wisconsin gives them a run for their money at Camp Randall Saturday nights. Wisconsin is another college play +14.5. And because we had some interest in revealing a English Premier League pick of the week, I'll go with Bournemouth. I believe that's how you pronounce that. -0.5 goal, +110 against Burnley. The reason I'm choosing this is Bournemouth has no wins this year, and Burnley has 1. So I would say somebody's got to win, but Fred will tell you that's not the case. They can easily tie.
In that league they could, yes.
Fred saw that in Portugal right in front of him.
Wow.
And one more to get revealed. Brian is 14-19, the former Auburn University swimmer and United States swimmer as well. He has a 5-star, Oklahoma -9.5. He likes Louisville -4. He also likes Utah +7. He throws in the Florida Gators +14.5. Danny's a Georgia Bulldogs. He didn't want to jinx. So he says,
I don't know if I'd touch that one.
They got Notre Dame -20, Auburn -7. So with all three of us on Auburn, that means if you're out in Vegas watching this, go bet Mississippi State because all three of us are on Auburn -7. He's got Tennessee -3.5, where I had Kentucky. He's got Colorado +17, where I had UCLA. He's got the North Carolina Tar Heels -12. Thursday night football, Tampa Bay Buccaneers +8.5, Dallas Cowboys -6.5. 49ers -6. Now, Fred, I want to get a little analysis from you where you would go with that 8.5 point spread, because I know you keep up with the Bucs and their defense is fine. Their defense is stellar. Yeah. Now, this offense, I don't know if Baker Mayfield is going to be the person that they hope.
It's in Buffalo. The weather shouldn't be a factor yet. Buffalo just came off an embarrassing loss to who was it that beat them the other day? Was it Cleveland? Who beat the Buffalo?
It was not Cleveland. And if you wouldn't have
they're off an embarrassing loss at home. The Bucs are traveling after a pretty bad beatdown by the Lions. A short week, and the offense is just anemic. I don't think they can cover the 8. Is it 8 point? I don't think they cover
8.5.
I just don't think they can score enough points. Short week. Oh. Buffalo's off an embarrassing loss.
At New England.
They can't score.
Buffalo's loss was at New England. And
the New England Patriots, who at one point were one of the worst teams in the league.
Well, no, they've won 2 games this year. So I think you could get Mac Jones, maybe the worst quarterback in the league.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that they're going to be pretty amped up. Thursday night football, coming off a loss. And like I said, the Bucs, their defense is probably playoff worthy. Their wide receiver cores are possession receivers. They do not have any speed. They don't create a bunch of separation. And so if you're not creating separation and your offensive line is not very good, I don't care who you have back there as quarterback. If the receivers can't get separation and your quarterback's running around for his life, that's a pretty much a game plan to not score a bunch of points. It's the same thing as last year with Brady. The only difference between this year and last year is Baker's a little bit. He's getting away from stuff that Brady would have never even attempted to get away. So the offense really hasn't changed. It's anemic, and they don't really have a breakaway threat. Their running backs are okay, and it doesn't really matter if they're okay or not because the offensive line is just not that good. And so I don't think they cover the 8.
Okay. So you would agree with me there. And, I'll ask you, like, if there was when we were running down those games, if there was a 5-star pick that would have jumped out to you, like, I don't choose a 5-star. I thought about maybe Notre Dame favored by 20 over Pittsburgh, but then I didn't even include, that game on my list. We're all on Auburn. How do you feel about Auburn? Because
I think actually Auburn covers that. I do. Okay. I think Mississippi, talk about anemic offenses. I mean, good God, they're actually. I was joking the other day, watching the Buccaneers offense is like watching Auburn. So I left Auburn the other night, went home to watch the Bucs, and it was like watching the Auburn players put the Bucs uniforms on and roll the same offense out. So I don't think their offense is that good, but I do think that Mississippi State's pretty bad. I think they cover.
Okay. Well, that means all 4 of us are unanimous.
Yeah, I think they cover.
I like that boost in confidence. I got to get your opinion on UCLA and Colorado, because people were surprised last week when I chose UCLA against Stanford, because a lot of people are aware for like the last 2 months, I've been working on this fictional book about a baseball player who plays his college ball at Stanford. So they just thought, hey, he likes Stanford. He'll take Stanford, just like they think I'm going to take Ohio State just because I love the Buckeyes. Well, I think I like Wisconsin this weekend, so that's not always the case. By the way, you make an appearance in that book. He gets a tryout at 29 years of age with the New York Yankees in spring training of 2024, and of course that is in Tampa, where you live. And this is what your line is. He's been friends with you for several years. He's been going to Lightning games with you, and he's very comfortable with you. So it's easy for you to say. He said the kid's name is Miles Fuller, and he says, Miles, you're welcome to live here until they cut you, which is probably not going to be very long.
That's a fact. That is a fact.
But you will appreciate this growing up a Braves fan. I've had to go back because I've been working on this book for a couple months. Who was the best team in baseball this year? It's the Atlanta Braves. So I've been talking about the 2023 season because most 75% of this book takes place in the 2024 season. And we know that hasn't happened. But I refer to the Braves as the World Series champs, defending World Series champs, because I thought they were going to win the World Series. So I spent some time this week looking for all these little parts. Correcting that.
I was thinking about that this morning. MLB cannot be happy about Texas against Arizona for ratings. They can't be happy.
Yeah, well, it's not New York and Los Angeles, though. I will say, a friend of this show, a guy who does the show frequently. I'm talking not as often as you, but double digits. Will Smith, the reliever for the Texas Rangers. Fred, he can become the first player in Major League Baseball history to win 3 straight World Series on 3 different teams. 2 years ago,
cool.
Yeah, 2 years ago, as a member of the Braves, he was the closer. He actually won games 1 and 2 of the National League Championship Series. That's not easy for a reliever to do. Was traded, was perfect, by the way, clean sheet through the playoffs 2 years ago. Was traded at the trade deadline last year to the Houston Astros. Astros won the World Series last year.
Wow.
Signed with Texas in the offseason. Just before the season started, he played for Bochy with the Giants. There was a lot of familiarity there. Yeah. Now, Will pitched real great in the National League Championship Series, his 2 appearances, but he did in I said the National League, I meant the American League Championship Series, but he pitched real well in the American League Divisional Series, and I expect for him to be on that World Series roster, and that would give him part of history if they can pull that off.
Clearly, there's nobody that's ever done that before.
No, it's been checked. And he is playing it down, Fred, but he's well aware of it. But he is he is a sincere guy, and he's so excited to be there. And we text after every single game, and we've been doing this whole thing like 11 more wins, 10 more wins, 9 more wins. And we kind of stopped at 6 more wins because they won the first 2 games of that Astros series. And then they lost 300, in a row. And then I started back again after the game 7 win. But I never thought that the away team, Fred, would win all 7 games of that series.
Nope. I don't think so either. And, everybody would say the Rangers should win this thing pretty handily, but everybody that Arizona has played has said the same thing, and they're in the finals.
That's right. I mean, what will the Dodgers love to spend money? So what are the Dodgers going to do in the offseason? I guess it's so tiny. They're going to get the very best that they can get. So I guess it's so tiny, but they're going to need pitching because that's the problem with them. It wasn't Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman, although they didn't hit great in the 3 games themselves, but they couldn't get the Diamondbacks out. Kershaw was just horrendous.
Horrible.
But they need every team in the major leagues, and I say this sincerely, not only because you're there in Tampa, but they need to kind of take a look at what the Rays are doing. The Rays don't have great big payroll, but they get the best out of their players that they can get.
No doubt. They get the biggest ROI of probably any team out there as far as their payroll goes. And they're it's not like they're 1 year they do it. I mean, they've been there for the last 4 or 5 years with that same model. So it works.
Fred, I have to get your opinion on this. On WOW, we didn't really talk politics, but on YouTube, I feel a little more comfortable doing that, and I don't think you'll mind me outing you. We're both on the conservative side of things, and finally, the Republicans ended up choosing a speaker, so now we can move forward with the business of the people. I felt that was a rather embarrassing 3 weeks, but I also will say to you, how concerned are you about what is happening not only in Israel? People might see that I'm wearing the bracelet here in support of Israel, but the way the media has turned on Israel and portrayed them as the villain when they were the ones being attacked.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a whole Talking with Tony show as well as the liberal biased media. It is shocking that the way they have spun, well, not this, everything is the way they spin it. And clearly, they have spun this as Hamas and the Palestinians are victims here. Now, I will also say, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination of that part of the country, that I don't think either party is lily white in this thing. I mean, there's been a lot of things that have gone back and forth, but I don't know how you can spin the atrocities of innocent people, elderly people, and babies as one thing. It's one thing when you're killing soldiers and skirmishes and stuff like that. But when you're raiding homes and pulling elderly and women and little kids and killing them and burning them and whatever, I don't know how you can put that as spin to make that as they're the victims here. It's impossible to do. And how people can literally stand up in front of a microphone and I sometimes wonder, do they really truly believe that, or are they using it as a soundbite? Because you can't truly believe that that's okay. You can't. There's no way that some of these folks who have come out and spoke against Israel and some of this and the stuff that they're doing, thinking that these folks that killed babies and cut off their heads and stuff like that, that was that there's some justification to that. It's insanity. It really is. I don't understand how they can spin it that way.
I was pretty upset with our Secretary of State the next day with the tweet that he had put out about, ceasefire. But he did delete that. And then he had, I think that we talked about epiphany or insight when he went over there and he saw pictures of what you just described to us that happened to some of these individuals. I could see how shook up he was in his voice. And he realized what the tweet that he had put up was wrong. He realized that Israel had every right to do whatever they feel like they should do and need to do. And then he looked at the cameras. He said, remember, I'm Jewish, is what he said. It was a different situation when he saw what had happened versus I think like asking for a ceasefire right now is like asking the Japanese the day after Pearl Harbor saying like, hey, let's go.
Go back 20 years in our history. Can you imagine if the press would have said, don't retaliate for 9/11? Would they have done the same thing? Would they have spun it that, well, the reason that we got bombed and those towers went down and the Pentagon was hit and all that sort of stuff is because ISIS was being victimized here? No, they wouldn't have. And so I don't understand how they can see the difference between those two, because it's insanity.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Fred, just like that, our time is up, but I do enjoy it. And people have asked about where you're at. So it's good to see you again. And I see things are well in Tampa. Our producer, Jake, is in Noonan. I'm in Auburn. I hope that you'll join us again soon, Fred.
Absolutely. Anytime. You know it.
All right. That sounds great. That's all the time we have for Talking with Tony. We'll see you next time right here on Talking with Tony.